Section 5, 1015 to 1145, West Texas Historical Association. I will be chairing it. I am Brian Schroeder. Looks like we have everybody here, so we will get going. Our first presentation is by Austin Allison, and his talk will be called Opportunity Knocking, the Vaughan Land Company and Early Bailey County Development. So, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So first of all, I want to say thank you to the Center for Big Bend Studies for the opportunity to speak about this topic. It's actually a topic that I've worked on for not quite 20 years, but for quite a while actually, because my grandmother actually had a little bit to do with the development of preserving some of the history of Virginia City and the Vaughan Land Company that I'm going to talk about. But first of all, I want to share a fascinating story about opportunity, ambition, and the challenges of early settlement in a narrow corner of West Texas. The story begins in Bailey County in the late 1800s, a period when agriculture and ranching were king, railroads were vital lifelines, and the lure of cheap land fueled the dreams of countless enterprising individuals.
Use
The clicker is actually not working. Does this have to be plugged in?
Probably.
Okay.
Let's troubleshoot.
Let's troubleshoot. Let's do it. There we go. All right.
Yay.
Matthew Charles Vaughan, or MC Vaughan, from Waterloo, Iowa, arrived in Texas in 1907. He wasn't the first to sell land in the region, but he and his contemporaries mastered new advertising techniques, often embellishing climate statistics, while also overstating the land's agricultural potential. This led to a dramatic surge in land prices. In Bailey County, dry grassland that sold for 50 cents an acre in 1882 jumped to $1 per acre in 1900, and then further skyrocketed to $20 or more per acre by 1909, a nearly 4,000% increase in just 3 decades. But what made Bailey County's land rush truly unique? In 1900, the United States Census recorded only 4 residents in Bailey County: George T. Smith, an English-born cook, and his wife and 2 children. They were likely associated with one of the ranches that predated major development. Though the Smiths soon retreated eastward to Palo Pinto County by 1902, they represent the earliest recorded inhabitants in Bailey County. Before them, maps from the Texas General Land Office hinted at a ranching presence as early as 1882, but its presence was tenuous and largely associated with the XIT Ranch in the extreme northern part of the county. The remaining part south was open ranch land. The first recorded land transfer in Bailey County occurred in 1882. Brothers Leon, Hyman, and Sylvain Blum acquired nearly 150,000 acres for 50 cents an acre from the state of Texas, thanks to an 1879 act nicknamed the 50 Cent Act that allowed for large amounts of unappropriated land to be sold for 50 cents per acre. In March 1882, Leon and Hyman Blum officially submitted 289 applications to the Texas General Land Office, with each application representing a single 640-acre section. Summarily approved by the GLO, this massive acquisition of the Blum brothers comprised more than 25% of Bailey County's 529,000 total acres. 2 months later, state surveyors were dispatched to Bailey County to lay out the tracts. Deputy District Surveyor Philip Toberman, along with 2 chain carriers, meticulously laid out a grid-like property 23 miles long and between 11 and 13 miles wide, bordering New Mexico. The Blums paid $75,000 in cash into the state of Texas Treasury for this land in October 1882. However, not all applications were patented. Some sections were rejected due to their location across the New Mexico border. A capital land reservation surveying error in neighboring land further reduced their holdings. These errors were later corrected, but it required additional surveys to be completed to sort out the mess in the latter half of the 1880s. In late 1882, Leon Blum acquired an additional 12 sections on the eastern boundary of their previously patented land. Known simply as Block F, it included Monument Lake, one of the few semi-permanent lakes in the region. With successful applications for the land approved by the GLO, the Blums now possessed a large swath of land that they could do with as they pleased. But what exactly do you do with 150,000 acres of land? Seeing opportunities to grow their wealth, they decided to enter the real estate business shortly after the acquisition. The Leon and H. Blum Land Company was founded in Galveston in June 1882 with aspirations of becoming a major player in Texas real estate. The Blum family, originally from the Alsace region of France, had built a dry and fancy goods mercantile empire in Galveston that executed millions of dollars in business annually by the 1870s. Following this financial success, the Blums diversified their wealth into real estate, investing their business income in Texas land across the state, thus explaining their large 150,000-acre acquisition in Bailey County. The Blum Land Company advertised the land for sale or lease in newspapers across the state. While some smaller tracts were sold, the land more significantly became host to several ranching operations over the next 2 decades. Going back, before the Blum land ownership, before they owned the land, the tract was crisscrossed by several ancient trails. The Fort Sumner Trail, the McKenzie Trail, and the various tendrils of the Comanche Trail, among others. These routes facilitated movement between New Mexico and central Texas, and are noted on this map where I highlighted them in red, but they underlie the map as well. One trail bisected the Blum lands from northwest to southeast, splitting near modern Arch Lake that falls in New Mexico. The easterly branch, known as the McKenzie Trail, led to Coyote Lake and the Blackwater Draw, following McKenzie's 1872 movements in the region. The southeasterly trail diverged towards Monument Lake and the Muleshoe National Wildlife Refuge. These trails, though meandering, offered consistent access to water, crucial for travelers and early ranching operations. Intermittent ranching operations existed on or around the Blum property as early as 1882, utilizing the Blackwater Draw, Coyote Lake, and Monument Lake as water sources. The Carter Brothers operation, for instance, was noted on this 1882 map. James W. Carter was an eventual permanent settler in adjacent Castro County. He eventually established his massive 7-Up ranch there. Noted rancher and buffalo hunter George Causey also had a short-lived ranching camp along the Blackwater Draw in Bailey County. Tax assessments show Bailey County's assessed values rising from 0 in 1881 to over $100,000 in 1889, likely due to the XIT ranch operations that began in the county around 1885 in the northern part of the county. The first permanent ranching effort on the Blum property was the Vivian Ranch, established in 1891 by brothers Charles and John Eddy, prominent stockmen from Colorado and New Mexico. They actually were some of the founders of Eddy County, which is where Carlsbad is. They partnered with James and George Bissell to form the Eddy and Bissell Livestock Company. They eventually refocused their entire operation to Bailey County after spending years trailing cattle between Colorado and New Mexico. They leased the Blum land in Bailey County and employed David Franklin White as their manager. White was a noted cattleman from the Abilene, Texas area, and he was responsible for more than 20,000 head of cattle on the Bailey County ranch. This operation lasted until 1896, when the ranch assets and cattle were sold to William J. Good and his sons of Quanah, Texas, who continued to use the Vivian brand and built a headquarters north of Coyote Lake. The previous Eddy and Bissell partnership earned $95,000 in profit from this sale. By the late 1890s, the Blum mercantile firm in Galveston faced increasing financial difficulties, impacting the land company's continued viability. In 1896, the Blums divested from their mercantile division with over $2 million in debt. Though the land company wasn't directly affected, its forward momentum weakened significantly. In May 1899, the Blum Land Company offered the entire Vivian Ranch for sale, which represented one of the largest land sales in that time period. But it wasn't until mid-1900 that James Robertson Coutts, a wealthy banker from Weatherford, purchased a 158,000-acre ranch for $1 per acre, a deal that included the livestock on the ranch. The Blums doubled their money in less than 20 years. Coutts formed his Bailey County Cattle Company and stocked the land until his death in 1904. But Coutts' ownership marked the last time that the original Blum property existed as a single tract of more than 150,000 acres. After his death, the southern half of the Vivian Ranch, consisting of over 80,000 acres, was sold to William Hurt of Lynchburg, Virginia in October 1905 for $2.25 per acre. Scarcely a year later, Hurt quickly sold it to William Harvey Garrett and his associates for $4 per acre in December 1906, making a substantial profit in a short amount of time. Just days after this previous land sale in December 1906, Garrett and his partners sold some of the tract to the Minneapolis-based Texas and Southwest Colonization Company for $5 per acre. They also earned a hefty and quick profit. This company, a subsidiary of the O.W. Kerr Land Company of Minneapolis, Minnesota, began aggressively advertising the Bailey County tracts in newspapers across the Midwest and northern United States. Founded in 1897, the O.W. Kerr Land Company was an active real estate company with holdings in North Dakota, Minnesota, Montana, and even Alberta, Canada. The company was well acquainted with advertising and selling land. Their first excursion of prospective buyers arrived in January 1907, just weeks after their acquisition of the land. The O.W. Kerr Land Company and the Texas and Southwest Colonization Company established a headquarters in Portales, New Mexico in early 1907. They even set up a temporary camp near Monument Lake that expanded to a small settlement in just a few short weeks. Their ultimate goal was to create a sustainable community, leading to the founding of the town of McKenzie in late January 1907, complete with a 2-story hotel a short time later. They ran twice-a-month excursions from Midwestern states, charging as little as $20 for round-trip travel. Advertisements, often exaggerated, touted abundant crops and underground water, appealing to farmers from the Corn Belt. By the end of January 1907, land was advertised for $11.50 per acre. A promotional pamphlet titled "A Texas Steer" was distributed to prospectors, filled with intricate illustrations and ornate descriptions. While some claims were accurate, others were highly exaggerated. The pamphlet called the region the best corn country of them all and described a rich chocolate loam on a clay subsoil with a grand, comfortable, health-promoting climate. It even included a map showing the land for sale. MC Vaughan, going back to one of our main characters, Vaughan, after 2 trips to evaluate land in Bailey County and being pleased with its potential future, founded the Vaughan Land Company in Waterloo, Iowa in late September 1907, acquiring rights to sell 86,000 acres in Bailey County. His company amplified the exaggerated claims using text and even maps from the previous pamphlet in his own pamphlet titled "Texas South Plains Land." The Vaughan Land Company copied text from the previous pamphlet verbatim and only threw in a few additional photographs to make it slightly unique. Vaughan's first buyer's excursion was in October 1907, with regular twice-monthly trips coming shortly after. While specific statistics are scarce, newspaper reports indicate varying numbers of excursionists, offering a rare glimpse into the volume of prospectors that came to Bailey County. Vaughan continued to use the infrastructure established by the Texas and Southwest Colonization Company, including the hotel at McKenzie. In late 1908, the town's name was changed to Virginia City, a potentially more exciting and illustrative name, harkening back to the Nevada Gold Rush days just a few decades prior. Vaughan platted Virginia City on Section 52 of Block B near Monument Lake. He even made provisions for a future Bailey County courthouse, which is highlighted in red in the red box. Transporting his prospectors across the Llano Estacado was challenging. The Texas and Southwest Colonization Company used 4 automobiles in 1907, and by March 1909, the Vaughan Land Company had purchased 3 additional new Buick Model F cars to aid in the transport of visitors. Vaughan even established the Vaughan Auto and Transportation Company, a subsidiary company that ran a consistent passenger and mail line between Portales and Virginia City. A post office named Montezuma opened in Virginia City in 1910. This post office was conveniently located in the 2-story hotel. The name Montezuma was chosen because another Virginia city already existed somewhere nearby, although this other post office or settlement could not be identified anywhere. News of the settlement and this colonization effort frequently appeared in Portales, New Mexico newspapers under headlines such as Virginia City or Montezuma Country Correspondence, or simply Virginia City Breezes. News detailing incoming visitors, society news, and updates on new school construction and prospective railroads appeared frequently, if not weekly, for a period. One of these news stories even included a story about the appearance of Halley's Comet. In early 1912, the C.C. Slaughter Cattle Company sponsored a telephone line between Virginia City and Portales, a public work improvement that assisted the movement of news and information across the Llano Estacado to Virginia City. Recognizing the importance of railroads for growth, Vaughan consistently sought to secure a rail line to connect his land with already developed communities and to enhance the method by which the incoming settlers and visitors and prospective buyers came to his land. Morris J. Healy, a noted and potentially infamous railroad promoter, targeted Virginia City for his scheme. In conjunction with boosters from Texaco, New Mexico, and Farwell, Texas, Healy launched efforts to found the Rock Island, Texaco, Farwell, and Southern Railway Company. Chartered in Texas in November 1910, this railroad began grading a railroad bed southeast from Farwell, with crews approaching and entering Virginia City by early 1911. This railway had many iterations and many different proposed routes, one of which even included a terminal at Alpine and the Big Bend country, but this line never came to fruition. Progress ceased shortly after reaching Virginia City. Railroad president and main promoter Healy resigned from his post in mid-January 1911, leaving the project in turmoil, seemingly disappearing from the region and from the project. Newspaper articles in nearby communities disparaged Healy, suggesting severe improprieties, with one newspaper even stating, "Why Healy, mighty Healy, the high muck-a-muck, took his nickel out, pulled down his sign, folded his tent, and silently slunk to the tall uncut, leaving the dazed, disgruntled natives along the proposed route groping, as it were, in absolute darkness." Here's some context about promoter M.J. Healy. Between 1903 and 1915, Healy promoted no fewer than 15 different railroads across Texas and actually even across other states. With grand promises and enormous community buy-in, not a single one of his railroads ever laid an inch of track. He died in Iowa in 1915, penniless and destitute. Healy's departure and the failure of the railway company plunged Vaughan's land scheme into peril. Vaughan attempted to revive the rail line in 1912 under the Denver-San Antonio Railway Company name, but little progress was made, and he soon abandoned that project. A contemporary legal case reveals that a surveyor hired to complete work on the line was never paid for his work, suggesting financial strains for Vaughan and his associates. Land values were directly tied to railroad proximity, and Vaughan's efforts in Bailey County suffered when the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad reached Lubbock in 1911. The ATSF chose a direct route between Lubbock and Texaco Farwell that entirely bypassed Virginia City and Vaughan's land by 20 miles, effectively ending any hope of a reliable railroad connection for Vaughan's land. Excursions continued through 1912 and into 1913, but dire weather conditions hindered Vaughan's ability to promote the land. Correspondence with independent land agents, such as J.C. Wicker, revealed Vaughan's financial struggles and his inability to pay loans, which in turn affected Wicker's own sales. Wicker wrote to Vaughan, "I am not mad at you personally. I am in such a shape financially that I have already hurt my credit. I have all the heart taken out of me." Vaughan abandoned his Bailey County efforts for more lucrative land elsewhere by the first months of 1914. In May 1915, Vaughan and his associates faced foreclosure notices on a large number of sections in Bailey County. F.F. McElhenney, who was president of the Black Hawk National Bank in Waterloo, who had invested in Vaughan's land company, also became insolvent, further impacting the Vaughan Land Company and its ability to operate. Vaughan himself faced a lawsuit in September 1913 for failing to repay a loan. By June 1913, the struggles became evident to settlers as financial and weather conditions worsened. A persistent drought rendered dryland farming untenable. Farming dwindled and updates featured in Portales, New Mexico newspapers became infrequent as the settlement waned. Prominent community figures like L.W. Fiscus, manager of the Vaughan Auto and Transportation Company, returned to Iowa, and hotel manager J.H. Rigdon closed the Virginia City Hotel and also returned to Iowa. As time progressed, Virginia City became almost mythical and a periodic topic among Bailey County citizens. A satirical 1924 article in the Muleshoe Journal stated, "Virginia City has a great future and has the longest and widest streets of any city in this territory. It is furnished by water from Lake Monument, a natural lake that travelers used and is on the old immigrant trail to Mexico. Billy the Kid once sojourned upon a time in the cliff near the lake. All remember he was a terror in New Mexico. Some few travel that way now. The city was once destroyed by Santa Anna in the year of 1832. There are some who think it was Quanah Parker and his tribe of Indians in later years. Surprisingly, there actually might be a few shreds of evidence to suggest Billy the Kid might have visited Monument Lake. Early ranchers in the county remember a group of outlaws camping in the caves at the lake in the early 1880s. And Billy the Kid's crew is known to have camped at Las Portales Springs some 25 miles away. So it's not impossible that Billy the Kid might have once camped at the caves that fall right there under that escarpment near Monument Lake. The vast majority of colonists returned to their original homes, leaving behind scattered but sparse remnants of their presence, such as junked farm equipment and a few corner posts marking property lines. This has all since disappeared. A school building was purchased by citizens in nearby Arch, New Mexico in 1916 and moved there. Neighboring rancher and land developer Maple Wilson relocated the Virginia City Hotel to his land south and used it as a residence. This building was later restored by the Muleshoe Heritage Center, where it remains a centerpiece today. Segments of the old railroad grade that was built in 1910 and 1911 are still visible in the belt of sandhills in the county. But it's unclear how long these will last in the future, but 115 years later, they still persist. After his Bailey County efforts, Vaughan briefly continued selling land in Hockley County and Crosby County before retreating to Waterloo, where he died in 1926. His obituary lauded his Texas land company, but his aspirations remain unrealized as he never saw his plans to build Western Bailey County come to fruition. Deteriorating weather conditions during Vaughan's years made his promises of lush crops impossible, despite earlier years with more abundant crops. Settlers struggled to pay for their land with such limited farming revenue during these dry years. Unlike Portales, which located abundant groundwater around 1909, Bailey County's land south of the Sandhills, where Vaughan's land company had land, lacked this easily accessible water, even from drilled wells. Surrounding residents were very skeptical of Vaughan and his efforts to colonize that part of the county, anecdotally recalling that suckers were the principal harvest, referring to the ill-informed prospectors lured by Vaughan. More than a century later, Virginia City and the Vaughan Land Company's efforts had little long-term effect on the region's growth or history. Few, if any, settlers stuck it out past 1913, and only the restored hotel at the Muleshoe Heritage Center and a few segments of the old railroad grade serve as reminders of its brief existence. A lonely Texas Historical Commission roadside plaque marks the location of Virginia City, a testament to a grand vision that ultimately faded into the dusty history of the Llano Estacado. Thanks.
We definitely have time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? We'll come to you.
I was wondering, what is the land use like today in Bailey County? Is the rural land in the hands of a few big ranchers, or is it owned by lots of different people?
So eventually that land became used for dry land farming. About probably into the 1920s and 1930s, it became used for dry land farming. But that area really never developed. Most of the land has now been transferred into CRP land, so that it's just grassland now. There's still a few farming and ranching operations, but it's mostly just grassland at this point. But the thing about it is that north of the Sandhills in Bailey County, the water is actually pretty prolific, and either through drilled wells or even through, it's actually a little bit more rainy up in that area, but for some reason south of the Sandhills, it's just much more arid and not as conducive to agriculture in that area.
Any more? Oh.
You indicated that you had some family connection to that. Are you willing to share what that is?
Oh, sure. So my grandmother was a civics and government teacher at Muleshoe High School from 1977 through 1992. And so about 1984 or 1985, the students at the Muleshoe High School launched an effort to save the Muleshoe Santa Fe Depot. And so they were able to restore it. They moved it to the Muleshoe Heritage Center. And so she was one of the founding principal people that helped in that. And so Muleshoe Depot was saved, the James Ranch House was saved, and eventually, about 2005 or 2006, the Virginia City Hotel was moved to the Muleshoe Heritage Center. And so whenever she started, I was in high school at the time, but I was intrigued by it, and so I was really interested in it. And so starting about then, I started to kind of do a little bit of my own digging, and there really hasn't been anything major done on the history of Virginia City or the Vaughan Land Company. And so it's been a project quite a while in the making. So it's good to be able to present on it.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, thank you very much. The thing that I like about this story is that it's a story of failure. Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm wondering, and you kind of do a great job summarizing it and concluding, but if you had to give us like 2 or 3 lessons of why this failed, what would you say?
I think that they overstated the value of the land. I think one of the things that is important to realize is that the state of Texas was not giving away land, but for 50 cents an acre, they were, giving away, land for pretty cheap prices. So a lot of it was bought up. 150,000 acres is quite a bit of land, really. And so, but whenever the Blums sold it in 1900 for $1 an acre, they still made quite a bit of money on that land. But then just a decade later, it was $11 or more, and then there were some that they were even trying to sell for $25 per acre. And so that is one reason why I think it failed. They were overstating the land's capability for agriculture and the climate, because they had a few actually pretty good years. And climate statistics actually back this up, that 1907 through 1909 were pretty wet years in that area. We don't have exact numbers from that area, but just in general, Portales, New Mexico, Lubbock, Texas had wetter years. But then about 1910, things started to go in a vastly different direction. So the land prices that were so high, they couldn't, farming revenue wouldn't be able to pay for that land. And so the land companies, I don't want to say they lied about the land's capability, but more or less they overstated what it could do. And then whenever the farming revenue didn't come in, that's kind of one of the reasons why it failed. And so who knows who's the main person to blame for that, but that's kind of how I would narrow it down.
We could do one quick one.
Quick, yes, sir, yes, sir.
You mentioned a lot of investors and settlement operations coming out of Iowa. Were you able to find what the causative agent was for that flowering of investors from that area?
It's interesting because there were a lot. This is one of many. I really don't know. I don't have a solid answer. I think maybe a lot of banks that were, at least for the Vaughan Land Company, he was backed up and had a lot of connections with bankers in the area in Waterloo. So I think that's one of the reasons why that. But there's other ones like the Soash Land Company was also big in this area. We've had maybe a little bit more success, but that would be interesting to try to track that down. I don't have a solid answer about that, but that is an interesting question. So, more research needed. Thank you all again for the opportunity to speak.